Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Reservoir's online service. It is so good to be with you. It is a crisp fall November Sunday morning here in Cambridge. Wondering how it is where you are. If you're close to your device and or computer and you can chat in, please do say hi. Let us know who you are, where you're logging in from this morning, and maybe what the weather is. Love to hear from you, and just remember that we are connected here as a community. It's good to get some conversation going. Hey, I'm Ivy. I'm a pastor here at Reservoir Church, where we hope that you discover and experience the love of God, the gift of community, and the joy of living this morning throughout our service, as well in ways that tip out and spill over into the fullness of your week. We have Thanksgiving week coming up, so I hope that all of those aspects, joy, love, and gift, feel true for you as you engage with folks around a table wherever you land. May you feel welcomed without exception this morning. I am going to walk us through some announcements this morning. I'm going to say hi to Carlos Montero Luque and Megan in Spain. Hi, guys. Hope it's sunny, maybe, at least there, wherever you are. Oh, yeah, there we go. 59 and sunny. Yay. Hello, Elizabeth Monroy. Good to be with you. So good to be with many of you from various parts. By way of announcements, I'd love to draw your attention, as we do each week, to our connection form. You can find it in the description on our YouTube channel. It's a great way for you to let us know that you are new or still feeling new for whatever reason, and just exploring ways that you might want to connect. That lets us know that we can have a conversation with you about that. You may want to check out a community group, or just hear from one of our pastors, or maybe volunteer. All of those are options on this card, and many more, so don't hesitate to fill it out. It's often one of the highlights of our week to be able to hear a little bit of your story and share a little bit of ours. I have a couple more announcements, which may be true for those of you who, sort of dip into our online service, but also come in person once in a while. If that's true for you, next Sunday is the Sunday following Thanksgiving, and we are going to have no kids programming here in person. It's an opportunity where every so often volunteers get a little bit of a break, and we get the benefit of having everyone worship in person. It's often fun and rich, but just as a reminder, there's no kids programming, littles all the way up to our youth group. Also, by way of announcement, if this is of interest to you, we are opening a Reservoir Classified account on Instagram. So you could actually search Reservoir Classified. We used to have something like this called the random list, and people have been asking and wondering, where did it go? So this is our newer version, brought back to life in some ways, Reservoir Classified. If you follow that account, which will go live tomorrow, you'll find a Google form where you can sort of list your classified. Maybe you're offering something, maybe you're looking for something, job, housing, or just stuff. That will be a great spot for it and for our Reservoir community. So Reservoir Classified, you can look for it on Instagram tomorrow. Lastly, again, if you're sometimes in person, December 3rd, 2 Sundays from now, we are going to have an Asian American meetup that's going to happen right after our in-person service in the dining room. So if you are an Asian immigrant or Asian descendant, you are welcome to gather there. And if you have friends or family, they are also welcome to come. It is BYOB, bring your own bibimbap ingredients. But that's happening in 2 Sundays right after our in-person service. I guess I have one more announcement, which is if you are interested in the Christmas choir, there are signups happening for that, which basically means email matt@reservoirchurch.org. No experience necessary. I know the go live time for the choir is December 17th, and there'll be some rehearsals and gatherings to some degree before that. But Christmas choir, if you're interested, it's open now for signups. All right, lastly, for real, lastly. I'm going to give an update about our 25-year anniversary campaign. Many of you probably have heard about this over the last, few months. We started this campaign earlier in the year primarily to fix up some infrastructures, projects that needed to be attended to, also to pay off our debts, and to begin new long-term investments in ministry beyond the walls and membership of Reservoir. And so we set a goal at that time, a cost of $1.4 million. And as it stands today, we are at $1,051,000 of that goal. Woohoo! Feel free to put emojis, exclamation marks, celebratory whatevers in the chat if you would like. But that's a big number. That's a lot of money. And so thank you to all of you who have pledged or donated to make that number possible. It's just unbelievable. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you again and again for just being such a generous community. As part of that campaign, which we hope to fulfill by the end of the year, it wasn't only a financial campaign. Nestled within it was a listening campaign where we really tried to draw out from so many of you, like, oh gosh, if we could imagine that we have $200,000 extra dollars in our annual budget, extra cash flow, like what would be of interest to you that you could name that's sort of in line with our vision and our values? What hopes and dreams do you have for our community and beyond? And so many of you offered feedback, and we were able to kind of shape those into 4 areas of vision. And so you've heard about a couple of those. 2 weeks ago, you heard about the first area, which was to encourage the health of vibrant, inclusive Christian ministries. And then last week, Emmett shared around the second area of vision, which is to make significant investments in community and mental wellness. And today, I wanted to share the third area of vision, which is to expand our beloved community fund. So, if you don't know, we have a beloved community fund that we started in 2020 as sort of this fledgling project, a way to be responsible and benevolent, and to think about how can we care and respond to the immediate needs of folks in our communities. So we set it up initially as a short-term financial assistance, emergency assistance that we've been able to fulfill in big ways over the last now 3 years. Anything from housing-related stuff to therapy to groceries to plane tickets, etc. And it's been really awesome to sort of see that myriad of requests be able to be met. We also hoped that we'd be able to connect folks that are looking for resources with sort of human resources, with a network of people that, if they're interested, could actually help sustain some of those needs and realities in ways that are helpful for people. So we set up a committee early on. There's 5 of us, myself, Tricia Rivas, Vernay Wilkinson, Sarah Vincent, and Elizabeth Monroy, who's online right now. Hey, Elizabeth. And we've been meeting monthly for these past many years. And very early on in our meetings, we were not only talking about like how to respond well to these requests that are just immediately coming in a timely manner, but we were also already asking at those points sort of these what if questions about this fund. Like, what if we had limitless budget or limitless resources? What would that look like? What would we dream for and hope for? And we kind of touched back to those dreams, those early dreams, every quarter or so, as we continued to learn more about what we were noticing, more about the kind of the core of the requests that were coming in, themes that were coming out of those requests, and also storylines of the requesters. So we held those in tandem to just play off of one another, see what we would start to see emerge, and hopefully inform innovative and creative ways forward for a beloved community fund that is not only set up to be responsive, but actually to be proactive. So some of those what if dreams from early on are sort of taking shape in some ways that are exciting for us. We've learned, not so surprisingly, that housing is a sort of critical nexus point that's kind of undergirds a lot of the requests that we see, even though on the surface they may come up as something very different. But the housing stress of access and affordability is really something that's a common core for a lot of the requests that come in. And then also, our requesters are disproportionately people of color, and specifically women of color, and also often single family, single caregiver household units. And so that gives us information, right, as we have these dreams held alongside, and we can start to build some of those what if wonderings into reality in some ways. Like, what if we could respond to some of these requests from women of color that integrates respite and rest and retreat and renewal? Like, what if we could use our space, our physical campus in Cambridge, which is not common in a adjacent urban area, to actually provide maybe an annual retreat for BIPOC women, or even more frequently? What would that look like? And so those are some of the things that we're playing with. We're also wondering, hey, there's a lot of organizations in the greater Boston area that are doing amazing on-the-ground work for a lot of these areas. And a lot of them are so good at what they do that they are also overwhelmed and stressed just with demand. So what does it look like if Reservoir could figure out how to bridge that gap a little bit appropriately? How can that have impact? Where does it make sense? So we're exploring some of those avenues. And we're already putting together this advisory board and committee. Many of you who work in the fields with professional knowledge and expertise in housing, education, healthcare, that can actually help us think creatively, innovatively, and actually with information to form new things. And I guess maybe at a baseline, to double our budget for Beloved Community Fund just means that we get more stretch, right? We get to offer more people more resources to help their lives and to continue to create and build beloved community. So that's a little bit about Beloved Community Fund expansion. If you have questions at any level of that, feel free to reach out to me, ivy@reservoirchurch.org. If you've kind of been on the teetering edge of I don't know if I want to donate or pledge or not, also feel free to reach out to me or Lydia or Steve or Tricia. And if you're like, oh yeah, thanks for the reminder, I've been meaning to pledge or donate, you can go to our website. There's pretty specific, obvious ways to do that make it pretty easy. And we're just so thankful for all of you, again, for your generosity and belief in what Reservoir could be in our local community and beyond. I think that's it for that announcement. And I think I will pray for us before I pass it over for our next song. God of wonder, I give you thanks this morning for our surrounding environments that feel so familiar, and sometimes in that familiarity or routine, we lose the luster and the awe and the wonder of what is around us. And God, could you maybe break open our hearts just a little bit this morning to take in the surprises of you and the beauty of nature, maybe a stranger's smile, maybe just a little lift of hope in a heart that's felt heavy this week. Whatever it is, God, wherever we need it most, you know. And so could you touch us right now, be speaking to us right now through song and through prayer and through sermon and beyond. We give thanks to you, God, this morning for your goodness, for your love. Amen. I'll pass it over to the band now.
spoke a word, you were singing over me. You've been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You've been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.
Was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I found no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind. Still unfound, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. You won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. No shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
Hi again, friends. We're going to take this moment right now to move into a time of collective prayer. We often use different sort of iterations of prayer at this time, some traditional, some a little bit of a mashup, some contemplative. And we're going to do that right now. I want to say hi, though, as people are coming on here from New Hampshire, Angie from New Hampshire, also somebody from Washington, South Shore, Benton, Maine. I'm from Maine, and I don't know where Benton, Maine is. And also Jean from Acton, Massachusetts. Hi, everyone. So glad you could be here and join with us. I'm going to move us into this prayer practice, which, if you think about prayer as practice, is an interesting thing. But often the simple ones are really there for us all throughout our weeks, not just in a moment of time that is solitude and silence and kind of a setting where we can sink into that more easily, but a practice actually continues to work on us throughout our days in ways that can hold us steady in times where there's turmoil or upheaval, or you've just lost some internal grounding. And so I just want to offer this prayer practice to you. It's a simple one in ways that if it feels resonant for you, that there's a lot going on in the world, that our hearts are breaking over in our local communities or in your own personal experiences, hopefully this can be useful to you. It's a breath prayer. So again, just drawing back to something that is a gift to us, our very breath. It's an ancient Christian prayer practice dating back to at least the 6th century. It's known as the prayer of the heart. And breath prayer is a good example of praying without ceasing, as St. Paul encouraged us to do. It has the potential to become as natural as breathing. So the breath prayer is usually said silently within. If you happen to be so moved and want to put it in the chat, you're welcome to, or at least one part of it. It's kind of in 2 parts. Some people sing it or chant it, or you could just journal it, or again, just sort of in your mind's eye of your heart, you can call it in there. It's simply repeating the prayer over and over again, keeping your attention on the prayer. And if your attention wanders, you just sort of gently return your attention to the prayer. And you can begin with really short stints of time, maybe 3 minutes. Some people expand up to 20 minutes. Whatever fits your life and your rhythm is certainly welcome. So I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes and recall this line from the Psalms: "Be still and know that I am God." Be still and know that I am God. Be still and calm and peaceful, just in this posture of opening to the presence of God with you. And with your eyes closed, you can just sort of imagine that God is calling you by name and asking you what it is you want. And give God a simple and direct answer that comes straight from the heart. What is it that you want? You might have a flurry of things that come to mind, or you might have one word that sort of represents all of it. It could be peace. It could be love. It could be help. And this answer is really going to be the foundation of your breath prayer. And then when you're ready, select the name that you're most comfortable using when you think about God. So it could be Jesus, it could be friend, Holy One, Mother, Spirit. What is the name these days that you are most comfortable when you think about God? And when you've arrived on a name for God, you're just going to combine that with that baseline prayer and want of yours. And that is your breath prayer. So for me, it's Holy One is the name right now in this moment that's resonating with me for God. And then a deep prayer for me is to heal us. So Holy One, heal us is my full breath prayer. So on the inhale, you can say in your mind, again, in your spirit, the name that you have for God. And on your exhale, your breath out, your desire of your heart. Holy One, heal us. It's kind of a vulnerable thing, but if you had a name for God or a desire of your heart or longing of your heart, a prayer that you wanted to share, you could put that in the chat, and we could just hold that with you in solidarity alongside of you. Again, it's just meant to be something that you can return to. And certainly if it didn't resonate, that be still and know that I am God is also a beautiful prayer that you can return to again and again. I'm going to pass it over to Steve now and move into our time of sermon.
Hey y'all, Steve Watson here. Great to be with you. This Way of Jesus series we're in is a look at what people call discipleship and spiritual formation. We're talking about the most enduring qualities of life and teaching of Jesus and asking what this means for us as we try to find peace and we try to live more just and flourishing lives. And any discussion about the way of Jesus has to reckon with the two most famous things about his life and legacy. One is that he was crucified. The other is that his followers claim he rose again. So this week and next, I want to talk about the way of death and the way of resurrection. Not so much what that meant for Jesus, what happened and why. Also, not so much for the theological meaning of these events. Like, what do we believe about God, or how might our connection with God change as a result of Jesus' death or resurrection? That's important, but death and new life are not just events in the life of Jesus or in the life of God. The way of Jesus talks about these things as participatory invitations: death and new life, surrender and victory, crucifixion, resurrection. They're patterns in a life of faith that we are all invited into. So next week, we'll talk about the way of resurrection. And this week, the way of death, or as I'm calling it, the way of surrender. Let's read a text I don't think I've ever preached on before, but I've thought of often this fall. It's one of the turning points in the story of the life of Jesus, the way it's told in the book of Luke. It's from the 9th chapter. It goes like this. When the days drew near for him to be taken up, he set his face to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him. On their way, they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for his arrival, but they did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem. When his disciples James and John saw this, they said, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" But he turned and rebuked them. And then they went to another village. As they were going along the road, someone said to him, "I'll follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another, he said, "Follow me." But he said, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." And Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Another said, "I'll follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to these at my home." And Jesus said to him, "No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." All right, I lead a Bible study on Saturday mornings here, and a week ago we read this passage together. We were like, what in the world is going on here? It seems like it's grumpy Jesus. Someone's like, "I'm coming, Jesus, let me join your movement." And he's like, "Sure, if you want to be nothing, have nothing, Other people, they're compelled by what he's doing, but they have these reasonable sounding excuses for why they'll catch up with him later when they're not so busy. And Jesus seems insulted, offended. Jesus has a reputation for love and kindness. Why so serious? Why so intense here? Another person in our group was like, why is he telling people to follow him? Like he's going to Jerusalem.
Hi, friends. I bet it's a surprise that I'm popping back in the middle of a Steve sermon. I am. You were watching a Steve sermon, but it is not this week's Steve sermon. So we are pressing pause on that and getting his sermon for this week up in the queue so that you can be invited into a sermon that is relevant and meant for you in this day. It will be just a few seconds while we get that going. But then you should be able to see all the components that are probably very familiar to you, like scripture coming up on the screen and various other elements. Just moving some things around to make sure that can happen for you guys. But wanted to let you know that you just caught a wind of a different sermon. And there's a new one coming your way in just a minute.
Hey friends, it's Steve. It's real good to be with you today. I serve on the board of the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. Our church partners with them to pursue justice in this city. And there, our board members take turns chairing our meetings. And usually at the start, there's some sort of brief question that lets us connect with one another personally. And our chair at last week's meeting's opening connection question was really a simple one. He just said, "What's your word of the day?" We were like, huh? He was like, "No, that's it. What's your word of the day?" And people were like, "I don't know." We said stuff like joy or troubled or ready or whatever. And our chair that day said, "My word of the day is resurrection." And we went on with our meeting. It was a doozy. We had a lot to talk about. The meeting went very long. But just as our chair was about to wrap things up, he said, "I told you at the start that my word of the day was resurrection. I want to end by telling you why." Now, there's a backstory here that we all knew already. Many of us on the board were recently in attendance at my friend's public hearing for termination of his parole. This friend, this colleague of mine, is older than me, and a long time ago, actually when I was a baby, he was barely a man, 18 years old. He committed a violent crime. And after conviction, he served many years of prison time. And then since his release, despite being a model citizen and a community leader, he's been on probation for decades. And that's continued to cost him money and opportunities and hardship. And recently he had an opportunity to go before a panel to consider termination of his probation to some 50 years after his crime to at last be a truly free man. And many of us have been there in support. And now our friend says, "Today my word of the day is resurrection, because today is the exact anniversary of the day I committed that horrible crime so long ago. And once I had nothing but regret. I have regret still. I wish I could undo the harm, but today I also have resurrection. Because I'm a new man. I have a new life. And I wanted to honor that day with you." The way of resurrection, my friends. That's our subject today. In this season in which we reflect on the way of Jesus, some of the most important ways we can live in and honor the life and teaching of Jesus, that we can find love, joy, peace, all the good things here. We're remembering the death and resurrection of Jesus, which so prominently featured in the Bible's reflections on Jesus Christ. Last week I talked about the way of surrender, how to die. And this week I want to talk about the way of resurrection, which really is how to live. We're going to read a passage about Jesus, but it's a much, not, sorry, I'm going to read a passage that's not about Jesus, but the way it is, I guess. It's a much older passage, also a kind of a story of resurrection. It's from the very first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. And the story goes like this. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he sat at the entrance of his tent in the day's heat. He looked up and suddenly saw 3 men standing near him. And as soon as he saw them, he ran from his tent entrance to greet them and bowed deeply. He said, "Sirs, if you would be so kind, don't just pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought so you may wash your feet and refresh yourselves under the tree. Let me offer you a little bread so you will feel stronger. And after that, you may leave your servant and go on your way, since you have visited your servant. And they responded, fine, do just as you've said. And so Abraham hurried to Sarah at his tent and said, hey, hurry, knead 3 seahs of the finest flour, make some baked goods. Abraham ran to the cattle and took a healthy young calf, gave it to his young servant, who prepared it quickly. And then Abraham took butter, milk, and the calf that had been prepared, put the food in front of them, and stood under the tree near them as they ate. They said to him, where is your wife Sarah? And he said, right here in the tent. Then one of the men said, I will definitely return to you about this time next year. Then your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening at the tent door behind them, and now Abraham and Sarah were both very old. Sarah was no longer menstruating, so Sarah laughed to herself, thinking, I'm no longer able to have children, and my husband's old. The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, me give birth at my age? Is anything too difficult for the Lord? When I return to you about this time next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah lied and said, I didn't laugh because she was frightened. But he said, no, you laughed. So this is a story about a lot of things. It's a story about hospitality. Right? Abraham and Sarah, they're with all their animals, all their people one day, just chilling in their giant tent, as one does in the ancient Near East. And these 3 strangers come on by, and they cook them an enormous meal. Abraham's like, how about we get a little bit of bread? And then he yells, hey, Sarah, get like gallons of flour. And he and a house servant, they slaughter and roast an entire cow. A young cow, maybe a baby cow, but still that's a large animal. And no matter what this text when it says means what it says, they did it quickly. Like it takes a long time to do all this cooking. And the tradition tells us like this is the way. It's a model. Like go all out for your guests. Actually, centuries later, the New Testament book of Hebrews looks back on this very tale and says, never forget to practice hospitality wherever you are. Because in doing so, you might just entertain angels without realizing it. It's beautiful. All right? Y'all like have a ton of food on hand. Like you never know. The 3 men, 3 angels bit, whoever they are, like this also is a story about the mysterious nature of God. After all, the tradition, even the text itself can't decide who these visitors are. At one moment it says the 3 men, but then at the beginning of the passage and in the bit right after it too, it says God appeared to them and spoke. So like, who is it? People or God? A lot of the tradition, like the book of Hebrews, splits the difference and calls them angels, but that doesn't help much because we don't really know what angels are. The word just means God's messengers. Some Christian artists imagine these 3 people to be 3 persons and actually 3 manifestations of God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This Christian formula for the complexity of God's personal nature. And this famous, beautiful Russian icon of the story is simply called Trinity. Who knows, my friends? Not me. I do know, though, the Spirit of God can be present to creation in many ways, and that God can speak in many forms. We can sometimes sense the presence, even the voice of God through a book, a film, a song, a friend, a stranger, an ocean. Who am I to say what happened here? So again, this is a story about a lot of things, but among them, it's a story of resurrection. Resurrection is, after all, the rising of the dead, that which is dead coming to new life. And there's a story of resurrection here. Abraham and Sarah's dreams, after all, were dead. Their sense of God's greatest, most important promise over their lives was dead as far as they were concerned. As a young couple, long ago, Abraham and Sarah, Abraham's brother's family, his nephew, his father, the whole clan, they had all left Babylon far to the east, and they had traveled west in search of a better land and a better life for their children. Theirs is the dream of migrants. Theirs is the dream of immigrants to chart a better future for their family. Like all immigrant dreams, though, there was suffering too. A grown child, Abraham's brother, died too young. Abraham's father was overcome with grief at the death of his oldest child. But even in the suffering, the dream lived on. And for Abraham and the next generation, this dream got real spiritual too. Everything that he knew or hoped about God was bound up with this dream of the future. Abraham, this worshiper of the gods of storms and wind and farming and moon, believed that a single creator God above all that was speaking to him and promising to him a hope of blessing. That blessing to him looked like good land to live on, a good future for his family, that it would in time become a clan and then a nation. And so mostly that blessing looked like descendants, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on, to see the blessing forward. But what happens? What happens to a dream like this that seems so sure, but that year after year doesn't come true? He and Sarah move through their youth and into middle age, and year after year there are no children. New moon after new moon, Sarah sees her menstrual cycle continue over and over, and no pregnancy, until her cycle slows and then stops entirely. And though there are so many ways we can have a legacy and a blessing to them and their imagination, the dream is dead. No children, no legacy. For all they know, no land. They're still living in a tent after all. No blessing. Perhaps no God. Maybe it was all an illusion, wishful thinking. Until these men or these angels or these gods, whoever they are, come on by and share a big, long meal and then get up saying, by the way, we're coming back next year to meet your baby boy. Sarah's like, how could that be? Or maybe she's like, how could that be? But the messengers insist it will be so. And the story tells us that it was. Life where there was none to be. Renewed dream, renewed blessing, renewed faith, resurrection. Friends, I want to pause here and notice what resurrection is not. Resurrection is not an undoing or reversal of the past. Where there is resurrection, someone or something has died. That still happened. So resurrection is a second chance, a new life or a new lease on life, which is amazing. But it also still doesn't undo the past. Abraham's brother is still dead. Abraham's father still died grieving his lost son. We meet the survivors of that family line, and they're pretty jacked up as a result. And Abraham and Sarah, they don't get back the 25 years they've been waiting for the child they didn't have. 25 years of dying hope. 25 years of dying faith is a hard thing, friends. This couple knew a lot of suffering. They made some pretty awful choices as they tried to find their way together. And they can't get any of that back. They're also going to be pretty old parents, and that'll change their experience and what they do and don't see too. I think of my friend I served with in GBIO. He's a man he never knew that he would become. He has a good life. I am so honored to know him. But he still doesn't know if he's getting off probation. And he still has to live with the guilt of what he did so long ago. And the lost years, the loss of his 20s and 30s while in prison, many other losses that come with that. New life, new freedom, new faith are beautiful gifts. Resurrection is a mighty work of God that opens up life and joy, faith, hope, and love in the present and in the future. But it doesn't erase the death in the past. I got a card recently for someone I love who I think can brood over lost chances in the past a bit. The card's a quote from the actress Marsha Wallace. This says, "Don't look back. Don't look back. You are not going that way." The past is over and dead. Dreams of returning to some better past, real or imagined, they are never God's dreams. Making your country great again, whatever that's supposed to mean. It is folly always, definitionally. Getting back to that way you felt when you fill in the age that comes to mind. It is not happening. Our relationships, our health, our churches, our families, our whole creation has no reverse gear. The past is dead. We can enjoy the memories. We should. We can grieve the losses. We must. But we're only alive today and we can only go forward. And so with the present and with our future stretched out before us, the best alternative to regret or anxiety, to illusion or despair, is to hope in God for resurrection, trusting that we never know when new life will appear. Earlier this year, I was talking about some of the griefs of my life with a mentor of mine, someone I think of as a pastor to me. I was talking about a couple people I love and wondering why certain things were so hard for them. And as parents and pastors too, I had regrets, like, would things be different now if I'd been a better or more effective person a few years ago? Who knows? I had worries too, like real legitimate concerns about how things were going to turn out. Mostly though, to be honest, I was stuck. Like, things seemed bad, and I don't know why, and I don't have no idea what to do. I was a little angry too, if I'm going to be honest. I wasn't sure if I was angry at God, angry at myself, angry at life in some generalized way, but I was frustrated. And my mentor, who knows me well, has heard a lot about the people I'm sharing about, and knows that I trust his empathy and kindness. He said, would it be all right if I share with you what I see? If I share maybe a different perspective on all this? And I said, of course, please. And he said, what if what you're seeing right now are actually stories of resurrection? I wasn't expecting that. I was talking about people whose lives I wanted to be going better. And he was like, well, what do we know about the risen Jesus? And I was like, I don't know. It's one of those, like, what's the teacher's thinking kind of questions. I said, I don't know. Like, what do we know about the risen Jesus? And he reminded me, he said, well, he rose with scars, didn't he? He rose with scars. Like Abraham and Sarah's resurrected dream, right? Having a baby in late middle age after 25 years of waiting, doubt, 25 years of bad choices. This is not the same thing as having that baby young when your hearts are full of God's promise. The same with Jesus. When he's risen from the dead, his closest friends don't recognize him at first. None of them do. But in time they do, in part because of his scars, the marks of his suffering. And my mentor shared his perspective on the stories I've told, how this person is alive when that wasn't guaranteed, how this other person may have struggles, but is a far better place with those struggles than last year. How a relationship between me and one other person had mended and grown so richly. He wondered with me, so maybe things aren't quite as you'd hope. It's true. But look what God has done. New life. With scars maybe, but new life still. I felt like Jesus' friends. Like, how had I not seen it? What my mentor was saying was so true. But my despair over things not being perfect made it so I missed that new life was everywhere present. This shift of perspective, it was interesting because it didn't just lift my spirits. It didn't just make me more hopeful and thankful, which it did. It also helped me get unstuck too. Like, if God was working resurrection, if new life was growing, then there were some things I could do to help. There were new shoots growing I could water. There were like little flames I could blow some oxygen on. Because resurrection is like this, right? God can work redemption stories, second acts, new possibilities, but then we can invest in those things with our hope and our help. Most things God creates, after all, maybe all things God creates. God co-creates with the universe. We are invited to co-create with God, to co-labor with God in the work of resurrection. And so with this child, I can write to them and praise all the growth and resilience I see. And with this other person, there's a way to communicate my trust and availability, love and prayers. Maybe that'll mean something. Maybe it'll mean a lot. We're not always passive in resurrection stories. If we're people who believe in redemption, if we're people who believe in second acts, second chances, better futures, then we hope and pray and help see those into being with God. That's why I have the semicolon tattooed on my wrist, right where I'll see it all the time. I like semicolons. That's a little unusual. I was an English teacher, so there's that. But it's also a reminder to me that there's always more to say. Like when a dream or a hope or a possibility or a life seems over, like there's some big period there, like done, full stop. I remember that for God, that's never true. There's always something left to say. There's always something more to do. We can't ever turn life backwards, but there's always possibility for some form of resurrection. And I want to be a person who believes that and who works for that with all that I've got. But it doesn't come naturally. I need this reminder. So it's right here to keep me hoping, trusting, working for resurrection. Still though, no matter what we do, resurrection is in the end a gift of God. It isn't earned or merited. There is no like spiritual algebra equation, like put in X much prayer and Y much hope and Z much work and this much faith and like here is the new life God will raise. It is not, life does not work that way. There's too much chaos and unpredictability and unexpected and beautiful mercy and grace, right? All good things in the end are ultimately a gift. Resurrection too, it's a gift. I think about Sarah and Abraham and the joy of their late in life baby. They're a founding mother and father of the faith for Jews, Christians, Muslims. So they, especially Abraham, have this lofty reputation. But friends, even in the Bible stories, they are not good people. Their marriage is full of scars from periods of deceit, doubt, unfaithfulness, cruelty. They barely make it as a couple, and it's not always clear that they should have. I'll spare the details right now because it would be a real downer at this point in the sermon, but they do horrible things to others too. Just violent, horrible things. And yet still they are beloved. They too are children of God. A God who wants to work to help all of us write the best possible story in our lives. And in their case, resurrection takes this particular form of a long promised but still quite unexpected child. No wonder there's laughter. Sarah's afraid to admit it in front of these holy, important guests of theirs. Like, is laughter undignified in their presence? But really, what is there to say but laugh? It's just too good to be true. But in the end, it is. And so they linger over this story, as we should linger over every moment of beautiful resurrection. They named their baby Laughter because they just can't help themselves. The joy is so deep. There's a psalm, a song of praise in the Bible. And I wonder if the one line in it about laughter is in part a reflection on this story. It's Psalm 126. It's a psalm of resurrection. It's short and beautiful. We're going to end on it. It goes like this. When the Lord changed Zion's circumstances, Jerusalem's circumstances for the better, it was like we had been dreaming. Our mouths were suddenly filled with laughter. Our tongues were filled with joyful shouts. It was even said at that time among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. Yes, the Lord has done great things for us, and we are overjoyed. So Lord, change our circumstances for the better, like dry streams in the desert waste. Let those who plant with tears reap the harvest with joyful shouts. Let those who go out crying and carrying their seed come home with joyful shouts, carrying bales of grain. I love this prayer. I really love it. It's so full of joy, mouths full of laughter, tongues filled with shouts, nations full of praise, hearts full of joy, arms full of grain, so much abundance. But it is actually a psalm for hard, lean times when you can't see the resurrection. Right? We're going out with tears today. Just seeds in our hand, nothing else. Lord, change our circumstances for the better, like dry streams in the desert waste. This is a psalm prayed through tears, but prayed in hope. It's a psalm for when peoples are at war around Jerusalem as they are today, and people are grieving and thousands of children are dying. It's a psalm for when you don't know if you're going to get your probation or not. It's a psalm for when your kids are hurting, but they're alive still and they're growing. It's a psalm for finding laughter again through our tears. In the way of resurrection, friends, we are dared, invited, called to never stop looking for resurrection. Where there is death, there could also be new life. It might not be what we'd call perfect, since there is no such thing. It might have scars, but it can still fill our mouths with laughter. It can still be beautiful. Wherever you are, friends, this year, this day, God can still do it. Pray with me, if you will. Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the resurrection yet to come, we call to mind our hurts and our tears and our desert wastes. Change our circumstances, we pray, God. Reveal something of the resurrection you are working so that we can hope with you, so that we can water with you, so that we can laugh again with you, God, and open our arms in gratitude to your abundance. May it be. Amen. Peace to you, my friends. I wish you the best of weeks. We'll see you back again in this space next week. Hey, friends, it's Steve.